Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some news updates, and I've got some trade rumors involving the Red Wings, the Panthers, the Blue Jackets, the Ducks, and a couple of other teams. Go to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss as per usual. We'll start off by looking at some signings from the past couple of days. There were 4 signings we want to talk about here today from over the past couple of days. The first one was in the Anaheim Ducks organization as RFA Sam Colangelo, who actually had a pretty good season last year, sort of starting to break out into the NHL level, was an RFA, needed a new contract, signed a 2-year extension with the Anaheim Ducks with an AAV of $850,000. It's not a bad deal in my opinion there for the Anaheim Ducks. Colangelo I think is going to be a solid top 9 forward going forward, so to sign him to under $1 million for the next couple of seasons, I think it's going to be a pretty good steal. Colangelo's past year had 10 goals and 12 points in 32 NHL games. So didn't get a whole bunch of NHL action after he had a goal and 3 points the year prior at the NHL level, but he did get some. He also had 22 goals and 40 points in 40 AHL games, so it was a point per game at the AHL level, and put up 10 goals in 30 NHL games. Like, he's on pace at this point in time to probably be like a 25 goal scorer next year. Like, that's a possibility for Colangelo. So with him being signed to 2 years, $850, I think that's a steal of a deal there for the Ducks, and if Colangelo can continue to grow and be a really solid player, I think this is going to be a really solid deal there for the Ducks. So very interesting note there, but the Ducks have signed Colangelo to a 2-year extension. Then we saw the New York Islanders finally give the first overall pick his ELC, and that's Matthew Schaefer. Schaefer, who's the left shot defenseman, signs a 3-year ELC, AAV of $975,000. Really solid move there from the Islanders to sign Schaefer. I think this does mean that Schaefer will probably wind up making the NHL roster this upcoming season. I guess there's still an outside possibility he could go back to juniors, but I think it's more likely at this point in time that he will wind up making the NHL level. Last year had 7 goals and 22 points in 17 games in the OHL. Did suffer a couple of injuries, but still, he was a pretty solid player there over in the OHL and looks really good. So I would not be one bit surprised if he was able to make a top 4 role with the New York Islanders coming out of training camp. So very interesting note there. But the Islanders have signed the top player in this past draft, and Matthew Schaefer, to a new 3-year ELC. So very good stuff there for the Islanders. Then we saw Vancouver Canucks actually bring back a former player who went over to the KHL, and that's Vitaly Kravtsov. Kravtsov, who was a longtime New York Rangers player, was dealt at one point to the Vancouver Canucks because the Rangers just weren't doing anything with him. Right after he went to Vancouver, he wound up signing overseas back in the KHL. A lot of people were really wondering if he was ever going to make an NHL comeback, but apparently he has. He has signed a 1-year league minimum deal in Vancouver, which does have some out clauses, which means he could wind up going back to the KHL. But if he does well, I could still see him be a solid top 9 forward there for the Vancouver Canucks. The past couple of seasons he's been playing over in the KHL. Last year put up 27 goals, 58 points in 66 KHL games, which looked really great. His last season at the NHL level was in the 22-23 season, when he had 3 goals and 6 points in 28 NHL games with the Rangers, and then a goal and 2 points in 16 games with the Canucks. So very interesting note there. So the Canucks do get a solid young player from the KHL who is coming off a really good season in the KHL, and if Kravtsov can turn into a really solid player at the NHL level, that might be a solid move there for the Canucks. So very interesting note there. And then another player who got a 1-year league minimum deal was in Toronto, as William Villanueva, the 4th round pick in 2020, who's a right-shot defensive prospect, 23 years old, gets a 1-year deal as well. Villanueva has not played the NHL level throughout his entire career. Last year played 55 AHL games, putting up a career high 4 goals and career high 40 points. After his previous 2 seasons, he had 25 points. So he looked a lot better last year. Now, at least do have a really deep defensive core at this point in time. So I think Villanueva very likely to probably just be sent down at training camp and start the season at the AHL level. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has a really good start to the AHL season, if he was one of the first call-up options for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So very interesting note there. But Villanueva, who was an RFA for the Toronto Maple Leafs, has signed a 1-year extension. So very interesting note there. But those are all signs from our past couple of days. as the Leafs signed Villanueva, Canucks signed Kravtsov, the Islanders gave Schaefer an extension, and Colangelo's also got an extension by Anaheim. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of news updates. So going over to a couple of news updates, we just have a couple of things here to talk about before we get into the trade rumors. So back over a couple of days ago, we saw a couple of former Tampa Bay Lightning prospects, Jane Dureyu and Sean Day, sign AHL deals with other organizations. Dureyu signs in Manitoba at the AHL level, and Day signs in Bridgeport at the AHL level. So those two are both decent prospects for Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm not sure if they would ever made it to the NHL level, but they were decent prospects there for Tampa. So they both left Tampa after not being qualified, and now they are joining the Minnesota Wild and the New York Islanders AHL affiliates. So once again, these are AHL level contracts. These aren't NHL level contracts. They'd have to show and prove enough to earn an NHL level contract. It's still very interesting out there that Rayu and Day both sign in other AHL organizations. So very interesting out there. Next one over to Adam Rodrigues, the former Arizona Coyote and Calgary Flame player who abruptly left the NHL a couple of years back after there was some sort of an incident, and then he went back to the KHL. Apparently is looking for an NHL return. So very interesting note there. Rodrigues at one point during his Calgary Flames tenure was looked at as a solid, maybe middle six prospect. But when he left the NHL, just after being claimed off of waivers by Arizona, he was more of like a bottom six guy, like a fourth liner. So if there's a couple of teams out there who'd be willing to take a chance on Rodrigues and could use him on like a fourth line role or like a spare forward role, I wouldn't be one bit surprised if he wound up being signed to someone. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But apparently, according to a couple of recent reports, Rodrigues is looking for an NHL return. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to the New York Islanders, Semyon Varlamov apparently is expected to start skating soon and may be ready for training camp. That could be a really big boost there for the Islanders. The Islanders signed David Riddick in the offseason because they were very unsure about the trajectory of Semyon Varlamov for this upcoming season, but if Varlamov is able to get back, that could be a really big boost. They may still carry 3 goaltenders on the roster for the season if Varlamov is healthy, just to sort of slowly work Varlamov back into the lineup. So we shall wait and see on that, but Varlamov apparently is expected to start skating soon, which is good news, and maybe ready to go for training camp. So really good stuff there for the New York Islanders. And lastly, going over to the Dallas Stars, one of their former players in Anton Hudobin has actually retired. So Hudobin, who played with Boston, Dallas, and I think there was a couple of other teams in there, wound up finishing his career with a record of 114 wins, 92 losses, and 33 overtime losses, had 2.52 GAA, 916 save percentage, was a really solid goaltender for a couple of years, especially in Dallas. During the bubble, he was great, leading the Dallas Stars to the Stanley Cup final when they lost to Tampa. So very interesting note there, Hudobin was a really great goaltender for the Dallas Stars, and he hasn't played the NHL level, I think, in the past couple of seasons, so he has officially called it quits. So very interesting note there. Hudobin had a long career. I don't think he ever won a Stanley Cup, but he definitely helped a couple of teams get to it, so very interesting note there. But Hudobin, who led the Dallas Stars to the bubble playoffs and the bubble cup back in the 2020 playoffs, has officially called it quits, so very interesting note there. But that's all the news updates. Interesting to see that Hudobin has retired. Varlamov might be ready for training camp. Rodrigues going to make a comeback to the NHL level, and Day and Durayu have both signed in the AHL, so very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we've got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about. First, with the Florida Panthers. Elliot Friedman was mentioning the Florida Panthers recently. We talked about this in our last video about how Matthew Tkachuk was talked about as potentially missing the rest of the regular season. So because of that, Elliot Friedman says he's not expecting the Panthers to move Evan Rodrigues. Now, after the start of the offseason, the Panthers went $2 to $3 million above the salary cap floor after signing Marchand and Ekblad and Bennett and all those other guys, and then the low-end deals. After signing all those guys, they were about $2 to $3 million above the cap. So that made a lot of people expect that they were going to have to move a guy, whether that be an Evan Rodrigues or maybe to some extent an Anton Lundell off their roster, to free up cap space enough to be cap compliant for the start of the season. But now with Elliot Friedman mentioning that Matthew Tkachuk is going to be on the injury reserve list for the first 2 to 3 months of the season, that will allow the Florida Panthers to place him in long-term injury reserve and allow them to still have Rodrigues on their lineup. So, I mean, if there's no reason to move him, if they're cap compliant with Tkachuk on injury reserve, why move him in Rodrigues? Now, it might be something that they have to look at moving closer to trade deadline if they don't have any more injuries and Tkachuk's coming back. They may need that cap space. So, I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that Evan Rodrigues is done getting moved, but I definitely think before the season starts, like, there's no chance anymore Rodrigues gets moved. I think it's most likely that that Rodrigues will stay with the Florida Panthers, will help offset the loss of Matthew Tkachuk for the first few months of the season. Then once Matthew Tkachuk gets back, if there are no other big injuries for the Florida Panthers, then that's a possibility that Evan Rodrigues could get moved. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but according to Larry Freeman, with the Tkachuk situation where it is right now, do not expect the Florida Panthers to be moving off of Evan Rodrigues anytime in the very near future. Next, going over to a proposed trade swap. I don't know who did this, but I saw an article recently saying that Igor Chinikov and Nick Robertson could be a swap that's made by the Blue Jackets and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So this is an interesting concept. The Toronto Maple Leafs definitely are still looking to move off of forward because they have too many on the roster. Nick Robertson, David Kampf, Kyle Yarncroke, those three guys who are heavily mentioned in trade discussions for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we heard that Igor Chinikov has asked for a trade and wants a fresh start somewhere else. We don't know exactly where, but he has asked for a trade out of Columbus. So with this sort of a swap in mind, it would be a very interesting one. Now I think Chinikov's a bit younger than Robertson and also has higher upside, so I don't think a swap would work for the Jackets side. I think it would have to be more going to Columbus from the Toronto side, but it's an interesting concept of at least a starting point for a trade. Like, I think Robertson, he goes to Columbus, he could be a solid top 9 forward, he could play a solid role there for the Blue Jackets, and if Chinikov goes to Toronto, he can play with guys like Matthews or Nylander, he can be a solid top 6 forward and put up some pretty good goal totals. So I think this deal has some merits to it. I just don't think the Jackets would find acquiring Robertson enough value for trading you or Chinikov, especially given the fact of what they could get elsewhere on the trade market. So we shall wait and see on that, but keep your eye on that as a possibility. I still think a team like the New Jersey Devils might make a little bit more sense, or even the Buffalo Sabres for the Blue Jackets to trade Chinikov too, but with the Leafs trying to rejiggle their forward group and try to move off a couple of pieces, I could definitely see the Leafs have some major interest in Chinikov and be open to moving Nick Robertson if it was able to land them. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to Pavel Zacha. I saw another article here recently talking about 2 landing spots Pavel Zacha could have. We talked about Zacha over the past couple of months about how there was some talk that Zacha could want to get moved. Recently, I just said that the fourthperiod.com mentioned that Zacha trade rumors are sort of speculating again, and the Bruins could be looking to move him again after trying to move him earlier in the season. And according to a recent article I saw, 2 landing spots for Zacha are the Vancouver Canucks and the Utah Mammoths. Now, the Canucks come as no surprise. Team's still looking for a second-line center. Zacha can play second-line center minutes. He'll be a very solid second-line center behind Pettersson and ahead of Hedel. Like, that would really strengthen the Canucks center group. Like, I think Zacha is meant to be a second-line center, not a first-line center like he has been the past couple seasons in Boston. The Canucks have a couple of really good assets they could offer Boston, and Zacha doesn't have an overly egregious cap hit. Like, it's 2 years, I think, $4.3 million cap hit. Like, that's not overly bad there for the Vancouver Canucks to try and acquire. So I could definitely see him have some major interest in a guy like Pavel Zacha, and I would not be one bit surprised if they were trying to inquire to try and add him. When it comes to the Mammoth side, they probably don't need a second line center because they already have guys like Schmalz and Hayton and Cooley, but they could definitely use another top 9 forward. They added JJ Peterka, which really did help them, but they do still have maybe 1 or 2 more holes in like their bottom 6 and like the 3rd or 4th line. So if you added a Pavel Zacha on like the 2nd or 3rd line and really sort of round out that team, Zacha can also play on the wing. So you place him on the wing, you round out that top 9. That would make the Utah Mammoth one of the deepest top 9s in the entire NHL right now. So I can definitely see him have some interest there. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if the Utah Mammoth tried to make one more move before training camp or before the season started. And Zacha, I think, could be a really solid veteran type add there for the Utah Mammoth. So I'm not saying it's a guarantee if Zacha gets moved. There's a really good chance the Bruins hold on to him. But if he was to get moved, I could see Vancouver and Utah, Vancouver probably more than Utah at this point in time, have some major interest in trying to acquire Zacha. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to James Murphy. He was talking about Mason McTavish and some potential landing spots, and he links Detroit as a potential landing spot for Mason McTavish. That's a very interesting one. We talked about Montreal over the past couple of days. I talked about Carolina in the past too, being a second line center. Detroit's a very interesting one. Detroit's also a team who could use a second line center. Now, Detroit has a lot of veteran top 9 forwards. I think could definitely intrigue Anaheim if they were to consider moving McTavish, because I don't think the Ducks would want a future-based package if they do consider moving McTavish. I think they maybe want more of like a player-for-player swap, or if not a player-for-player swap, at least someone who can play on their NHL roster. So I definitely definitely think that could work. The Red Wings have the space to add McTavish because McTavish needs a new contract. They also have the assets they can move to Anaheim to try and create a trade. Like, they have some really good prospects and some pretty decent draft capital and some NHL level players. So I definitely think Detroit could be a very good landing spot for McTavish, because I do think if you had Larkin, then McTavish, and then Marco Kasparich as top 3 centers, that would be scary to face for years to come. And on top of that, if the Ducks do wind up deciding to trade, which is not guaranteed at this point, but if they do wind up deciding to trade Mason McTavish, adding a guy like Cobb or a Comfort or something like that who can help in the middle 6 might be a smart move there from the Anaheim Ducks. So we'll shall wait and see on this, but James Murphy does wonder the Detroit Red Wings could be a team who winds up acquiring Mason McTavish if the Ducks do wind up trading him. So we shall wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'd love your guys' thoughts. Do you think McTavish could go to Detroit? Personally, I think that's a very likely possibility with the Red Wings' assets and their need for a second line center. Do you think Zacha could go to Vancouver or Utah? Do you think we could see a Chinikov Robertson swap? And are you surprised that the Panthers may not be moving off of Evan Rodrigues now? Definitely really thoughts on all of that, plus the news updates and the signings from the past couple of days. That's all I'm going to talk for today. We're going to like this video, and for others, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. If that's going to check that out, I'm going to check that description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.